In this episode, I talked to Paul Witcomb, who has worked for 20 years as a psychiatric nurse with the NHS on the front lines. We talked about the different trainings that he's done with Dan Millman, the author of The Peaceful Warrior, a very famous book about spirituality. His training in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, the training in shamanic training in Hawaii that he did, his work with the Generative Change movement currently, and meditating throughout the day, how to take moments out of the day to practice mindfulness. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So welcome, Paul Witcomb. Thanks very much for joining us. A little bit of context for our conversation. We both got into integral life practice around the same time. And integral life practice is, for those who don't know, it's sort of combining practices of body, heart, mind, and spirit into some kind of unique weave or blend.
Yes.
And it doesn't tell you which practices to do in those areas, those four fundamental domains, but it says that it's important to do something in all of those four areas. And so we met each other around that and did some workshops together and that kind of thing. And so we're going to talk today about your personal journey with transformational practices and also, you know, how you came across this integrating desire to weave these things together. One of the themes that's come up with talking to other people is that a lot of people have always been this way. They've always been interested, you know, even when they were children, in lots of things. And then there's this moment somewhere along the point where the journey where we feel that we're being pushed to make a decision to choose one thing over the others. That might be coming from the outside. Some influential person or people in your life are kind of trying to push you that way. And then you have this sort of moment of revelation where you realize that you don't have to choose. You can actually do all of these things. And that's actually can be a really good thing, because these four fundamental domains of ourselves potentiate each other. And,
they do.
So I wanted to talk to you about this stuff, because I know you've done lots of different practices in these areas. And I'd love to talk a bit about your work as well, woven into this story, because you're sort of on the front line with working with young people and adults with mental health and all that kind of stuff. So sound good as a context there?
Yeah, it does sound good.
Okay.
So So there's
so where does your journey start with all of this stuff?
I think consciously about stepping out of the rat race, so to speak, or seeing something different, which I always felt was a bit dry pretty much all my life, going back. That the kind of, you know, the conventional way of living is, you know, you go to school, get an education, get a job, get married, or whatever, and then retire after that. I always found that a bit kind of, there's got to be more. So I kind of stepped off. The calling for me was kind of always underlining there was something else. I just felt this pulse inside saying, there's more to this, there's more dimensions, there's more aspects kind of going on. And I started reading self-help books in the 90s, and then went around telling everybody else from where I was reading it what was wrong with their lives, kind of not very helpful in a lot of ways. You kind of lose a lot of people that way. It says this in so and so, kind of not really being genuine or authentic with it. So, and kind of really realizing that was me, kind of at that point. I wasn't really doing any of those things. And then I read Way of the Peaceful Warrior from Dan Millman, and that touched something inside. That kind of resonated. And I read that book a lot. That story of his life, and they had this mentor teaching him. It kind of made sense to me about just practical living. Everything is a practice. You know, from the moment you get out of bed and walk through your day, it's kind of everything is a practice. But where do you start? How do you start that with yourself? And how do you take that seriously with yourself? And then I kind of, it was around about the same time I started my mental health.
Well, you just before we leave Dan Millman, you actually went to do some, workshops with him in person. Did you?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
I've done quite a few. He's become a friend.
Yeah. So I mean, he's really quite. He's kind of like an A-list spiritual teacher. He's quite a big personality. Could you say a little bit more about those workshops and what it was like to work with him in person, having read his book? Because quite often we'll read an influential book, but never take the next step to actually meet that person and check them out as an actual person. Because so much of the proof is in the pudding. It's so anyone can write a book, but when you actually meet a person in face to face, they transmit their own state of being, don't they? And they can't kind of pretend around that stuff. So I mean, perhaps you could describe what kind of things you did in these workshops and what Dan was like as a person.
Dan wasn't a disappointment from what I saw in the books. He is completely genuine to his teaching and authentic to what he teaches. And what he teaches is really kind of quite simple, but yet not easy. So the first workshop I did with him was his courage training, which was in the Omega Institute in the States. And the courage training was kind of based around Kali martial arts, Filipino martial arts, which is weaponry, but it was all about moving and breathing and about dealing with adversity when under great pressure. So it's about staying relaxed and yet moving and kind of engaging that warrior spirit, but in his teaching in a peaceful way. So it was an intense training involving lots of moving, and then culminating with there was 50 plus participants and his assistants as well, who were from various backgrounds and various martial art experts. And you stood in this big hall, and when it was your turn, you stood and you waited, and then 3 or 4 of these assistants come running at you with a knife.
Wow.
From all directions. And your job was to maintain breathing. You didn't pass if you stopped breathing. So if your breathing was inhibited in any way, and flow, and just to move out of the way of these knives coming at you as best as you can without being hurt. So obviously, the good thing about it is the knives were training knives, but they'd still hurt if they was to catch you. And and 50 other people around you as well. And and kind of that philosophy of life, for him, he always says here and now, breathe and relax. In every moment, you're doing everything with refinement and grace.
I think that what I've picked up from the little I've heard I've heard a few interviews with him and read the odd bit here and there. He seems to have that almost that kind of Japanese Zen approach to everything in his life, a little bit like, everything's a sacred act, no matter how small, like putting your shoes on, how you get out of bed, how you make your food. I mean, he was a competitive trampolinist. I think he was
a gymnast
a gymnast, very high level gymnast.
And he got selected for the Olympics, the US team.
Yeah.
And he had an accident where involving a motorbike, and his leg was pretty much smashed up. And then after that, he went into trampolining. But yeah, his philosophy is, we're talking, starting this off about integrating mind, body, spirit. He does that. One of the things that he teaches you when you go with him is his peaceful warrior workout, which takes 4 minutes to do. And he says, the last time I saw him, so it's longer now, he says he's done it every day to some sort of fashion for 25 years consistently. So the last time I saw him was maybe 10 years ago. So I would imagine that's still going on 35 years. So he teaches that, which is a blend of yoga, Tai Chi, and some, push-ups and sit-ups. Being mindful in emotion. Like you say, you touched on teaching everything as a practice. So, one of the stories that comes out that he often tells is that when he's talking about his mentor in his book, this friend Socrates that guided him, watched him gymnastics once. And Dan, the story always sticks with me, and I quite often tell it even in my work. He says he's doing the bars, I think the bars, when you spin around and they got the lower bar. Yeah. And he says, he goes, I did the best routine I ever did. And I hit the dismount perfectly. And he talks, I then walked over, and he goes, got my t-shirt, threw me top down, took my top off, threw it in my bag. And I said to Socrates, Sock, what do you think? And he goes, well, your last move was pretty sloppy. And Dan says, yeah, but that's the best I've ever done it. I nailed that dismount. And Socrates looks at him and goes, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about the way you threw your top into your bag.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of things, Dan says, there are no ordinary moments. Each moment is special.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me of there's a Zen story about some Zen master really having a go at his students for forgetting which were their shoes when they put where their shoes were in the racks where they put all their shoes when they go inside the Zen temple. That they're there doing all this kind of hardcore Zen practice, but what's the good of all of that if you can't even find where you put your you haven't got the presence of mind to know where you put your shoes when you walk into the Zendo. So that kind of meticulous attention to all the details in your life, and using the opportunity to make anything in your life a special, meaningful, or sacred act is quite. It's a very simple concept, but it's very hard to do because it's all about remembering. So much of all of these practices, particularly the spiritual ones, are more a case of actually just remembering, which is a very difficult thing to do with all the distractions in life, isn't it?
Yeah. And for him, he said he became a writer because one of the things that he says that he learned to write or started writing because he didn't have enough words to be able to explain what it is that he learnt and what he was doing, and that. So that's him. I suppose I can't really speak any more about that because you'd really have to ask him.
Yeah. So we're recommending people read his book and then take that further if those things.
It's some great books, and the greatest teaching that he ever gave me was never at his workshops. he doesn't even know this. So if he ever watches this, he will learn, and one day maybe I'll tell him. He, for me, he is somebody that he lives what he teaches. He lives it what he teaches. You know, you can email him. Anybody can email him. I said this. You can email him now, and he'll respond to you within 48 hours. That's, I think, incredible. But I met him in London. I've met him gone out for meals with him a couple of times when he's come over to do workshops. And we met up in London. I can't remember whereabouts, but we went to a Wagamama's. And he just flown via LA to Germany, and then from Germany to London. And we all got there, and both him and I needed the loo, so we went off to the loo together. I come out ahead of him, and I was looking at him cooking the food as you can in Wagamama's, and he walked out behind me, and out of the corner of my eye, I just seen him breathe and relax. And I've never seen anybody just let go. I've never seen it. It's just an energetic thing, and I'm doing it now. My hair's starting to stand on end. He just completely transformed. Everything just let go. He almost rippled when he did it, and that's stuck with me ever since. That, you know, wow, you can get to that level. He's 65 years of age, and he's more supple than what I am, and he's 20 odd years older than me. And I just thought, wow.
Yeah. So that's the kind of transmission you get from people in person that you don't really get through reading books.
No.
So that's, speaks to the importance of not just reading books, but if you're very much interested in a person's work, you can actually take the next step and find that person, to spend time with, because there's a transmission that comes through that's different, isn't there?
Yeah, I think from his workshop, I got a structure, I think. A kind of I didn't know it at the time. There's kind of a structure that's kind of slowly through some of my filters and my blocks and my kind of ways of kind of interpreting and seeing things and beliefs and values at the time. It slowly kind of held that, and it spoke very deeply to me, to where I'm at now about, I kind of finding more of the teachings that I've had from, or that I've learnt through workshops with Dan. I'm probably engaging with them more now, more consciously now than what I was at the time. I think I was just wanting to do all sorts of different stuff and not really settling in one, which
that's an important thing to bring up, is that at the time different bits of information take root in our lives at different times. Like, it's the old thing of the fruit is only ripe when it's ripe, or the ground is only the right conditions for the seeds to grow at whatever time of year. And people can sometimes think that they need to sort of get the entire download in one go, but
yes.
You can, if things are not landing in the moment, then that will never go away. There's always a part of your kind of subconscious which is always trying to get a handle on this stuff, and it can take years for suddenly the opening to happen, and then it just kind of takes root.
Yeah,
so it's something I found in my life, that things that didn't make sense at the time, but I thought, I know this is important because it's coming from a source I respect, so I'm just going to kind of bear that in mind. I kind of put that back in the sort of subconscious storage somewhere, and then one day it's just out of nowhere, boof, it's like, whoa, I get it now.
I think there's a quote that's coming to my mind. It's a very common quote, well, I think it's a very common quote, it might not be, which is, knowledge is only a rumor until it's in the muscle. So, you know, reflecting back on Dan, you read the book, the books resonate. As I was saying earlier, I kind of read Peaceful Warrior 8 times. And then it was several years after that, I did my nurse training, then I did NLP training stuff, so I was getting all this stuff, and then I read the sequel to Peaceful Warrior, which was Sacred Journeys, and that really, that's the book that gave me the courage to kind of say, I need to change direction.
So let's pick up the story there then, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's the book that said I need to change direction. I wasn't happy with my life. I felt that I was mechanical. I felt life was mechanical. I was just doing what I don't know how to put the way I'm doing the quotes, just going to work, doing a 9-to-5 job, coming home. My wife and I, at the time, you know, I was married, I still am married, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with the direction that we was going in. We seemed to be fighting a lot. I became very insular. I went really inside myself. I was not depressed, but stuck. And everything kind of like, there was something more. There was this something more. I'm reading Dan's book, Sacred Journeys. I don't know whether it's because maybe it had a little bit more of a spiritual element. He, you know, the backdrop, he had a different teacher. She was like a Hawaiian shaman, and all these magical things. You go on inner dreams and all these things. And there was one bit in there I can remember about, I don't know, it just resonated, and I decided, no, I need to go on. He even talked in that book at the beginning that he wasn't happy in his life and he had to change, and there was something going on for him. And I just thought, that resonated with where I was at that time. So it kind of planted a seed, and I think a few years after that, or maybe not long after that, my wife and I separated. I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this, which was very crushing. And then that's when I thought, he must have a website. And that's where I found him and went off and did workshops. And I thought, I've got to meet this guy.
One of the definitions of dukkha, which is a Buddhist word, is sometimes they call that translated as suffering, but the word dukkha also means stuck. And that feeling of discomfort, of not moving freely, you know, having that kind of continuous energetic flow, and that's often kind of cited as one of the motivating forces to actually take up some of these practices to make your life better. And yeah, it's quite common. You know, it's certainly been the case with me at different times in my life where I've felt that stuckness, to sort of try and push it away because it's such an uncomfortable feeling. But that sense of stuckness is trying to tell you something, isn't it, really? And we can listen to that message, or we can bury it, but it's not going to go away. You know, I suppose the next step is to think, well, what's a sane and courageous yet caring way to go about getting unstuck.
Yes. Yeah. I was kind of thinking that, as you were saying that, then that I've always trusted my guts. Never been able to I've always often struggled to articulate what I feel. Which kind of, I think, has been a kind of blessing and a curse in some ways, because I use other people, I got into the habit of using other people's words to kind of explain what was going on, rather than finding it within myself to explain that. And
Well,
that comes with stuckness.
we all start that way when you're learning,
Yeah.
and you know, anybody who learns anything,
Yeah.
that's how it goes. And I think we shouldn't feel bashful about that. I certainly, you know, did and do the same thing, and I got to a certain point where I was like, I'm not going to worry about that anymore. I'm just going to do it until it becomes my own, and that'll just happen, you know, at the right moment.
Yeah, but what was coming to is that even in that stuckness and just thinking, oh, life, I'm not this, life is not this, it's kind of, what's the way? I kind of, that sense of making myself small,
Contracting
and contracting inside, and making myself small, and not appreciating. I think it was that it's kind of the opposite to kind of what Dan was teaching, really, is that appreciate there are no ordinary moments. So, you know, you get used to your life, I think, and you kind of get used to what you're doing. It kind of becomes comfortable even when it's uncomfortable. You know, the better the devil you know than the devil you don't scenario. And you just think, you don't give it that meaning that kind of what you're doing and what you're touching on is important, that it is special. It's not ordinary just because other people are doing it. And I suppose I've got wisdom now and experience to kind of look back on it. But at that time, you know, I was doing something important. One of the things that on the courage training that Dan had you do, which was, or invited you to do, was to stand up, say your name, your age, and where you're from. And I can't remember the exact things. And then just people just got up and applauded you just for being a human being and just for living the life that you've lived, no matter what you've done. And that was an incredible experience. I have no words to kind of explain how that affects you at the time, but yeah.
I've often thought that everybody is a complete expert at being themselves, and if you were to swap into someone else's life for, I don't know, a month or something, most likely you'd come out of it going, oh my God, what this person is able to do every day is amazing, you know, because it was so different to, you know, if we were to swap lives, I'd probably come out the end of that experience going, oh my God, Paul is like some kind of genius, or got just unending depths of courage, you know, in whatever his life is, or unending energy or something like that. But they're all, lives are so, they're unique and specific and so different that yeah, we can't even imagine what life is like for another person. Even it's just, if someone had chronic pain, for example, if you don't have chronic pain and you swap lives with someone who had chronic pain and you did a month of that, you'd come out thinking, wow, this person is tough beyond things I imagined. Or just, you know, that's just an example.
Yeah. And I talking of chronic pain, there's been two interesting points in my life where I've had chronic back issue, which resulted in surgery last September. But even at the time that I'm kind of going back to when I read Dan's second book, Sacred Journeys, I, prior to my wife and I separating in February of 2006, I'd been off work for about 3 months in incredible pain with my back, and I had an epidural that kind of freed it up and got me moving again. And that's when I decided that, well, no, I was being, in some ways, the chronic back was holding me back, as if to say, you need to reevaluate your life. I'm holding you back because this is not your journey. This is not your path. There was, as strange as that may seem, I can look back on it now. Each time when my back has got in my way, I've made changes. And then my back's eased for a few years. And then I got into stuckness again. kind of in a lot of ways, or I needed to slow down, and I think start to put into practice and download all this information and all this experiences that I'd been on. Because I think I started with Dan, and then I went into something else, then I went into something else, and then integral, which we called then teaching integral.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, I'm kind of, this life, all this fantasy is going on these holidays and going on this, was kind of it's kind of like a fantasy in some ways. I was doing them rather than bringing them into my life, rather than, well, I've got all these tools now, where do I apply all these tools? I'm feeling very lost and very confused. So that would be one of the things that I would say to people when you're doing things, is just make sure you're building pauses. Make sure you're building pauses and reflections.
Yeah, one of the people I was talking to recently, she said that that there's this moment where you're a bit like a child in a candy store, where there's so many things you can do, so many practices you can do to explore life, that there's this kind of overwhelming moment where it's all on offer and you don't quite know how you're going to squeeze all of that in. And then as time goes on, you sort of, the list of things that you to do kind of whittles down, and you start to gravitate towards some smaller number of practices that become your familiar mainstays. So is that to kind of resonate a bit with you, what you're saying?
Yeah.
So what's next in your journey then? So you'd sort of gone to see Dan Millman, done these workshops. Then you said you did a nurse training.
I did that in again. That was an interesting thing. I never ever entered my head at all, even though I was working in care. And that was interesting how I got into that. Again, I was working as a road labourer. My back went. I was off work for a while. Mum got me a job in a residential home where she was working as a carer. I went in there as a waiter, and then moved into care, and then started to become interested in psychology. I'd been reading a lot of self-help books. As I said, I thought, I want to go on and do psychology. I've always felt this call, this to serve, not serve, but to help people, just to help people feel better and understanding. I was always, as a teenager, if you've got a problem, come and talk to me. And I was working in these different nursing homes, and the trained staff was saying to me, "Oh, you ought to be a psychiatric nurse. You'd be really good as a psychiatric nurse." I was like, what? I was like, why are these people telling me I want to do psychiatric nursing? I want to do psychology. Stop telling me about psychiatric nursing. I didn't know what psychiatric nursing was. Never really entered my head what it was. And then for some strange reason, and I don't know how, this is life, my family started saying to me, "Paul, we've been thinking about you. You're working in this. Why don't you do psychiatric nursing? We think you'd be really good as a psychiatric nurse." And you talk about how, like, I applied then to the university nursing funding, or holds it for people that want to go into training. They turned me down. I thought, well, see, this psychiatric nursing thing, I've got turned down for it. It's not what I meant to do. And then Bournemouth University phoned me up and said, "We've got a place for you."
Wow.
So I ended up learning about, becoming a psychiatric and a mental health nurse. And never, as the first time as a student, I walked onto an acute psychiatric ward. I was very nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I'd never done it before. But it's been incredible. That knowledge, that whole journey, and what a nurse is. It's almost like I've kind of arced in my journey now. I was asked last year by a like a team leader, as if to say, what model do you use in when working with clients? Which is kind of taking me kind of a little bit into the negative side of things, really. In mental health with CAMS, there's a lot of therapy, so you either have to be trained in CBT or DBT or some form of recognised therapy that the NHS endorses. And I've got knowledge in a lot of them, but the ones that I'm trained in, they're not accepted. So NLP, a little bit of hypnotherapy that I'm trained in. And the other stuff that I've done in metaphysical training or anything. But I have a natural way of understanding the work. I really love dialectical behavioural therapy. I suppose that's because I've done Zen stuff or done training with Dan. It has a resonance to it. I just get it. And I said, I don't. I said, I just bring it all in. I've had in-house training stuff. She goes, well, you can't say that you've used the CBT approach. You can't say that you've used the DBT approach if you've not trained in it. And I come away from it feeling quite hurt, quite upset. I do great work. I do good connections with people. I've had great results with people. And now I'm being told that what I do is, and I just thought, actually, what is my profession? I'm a nurse. And there's no real, in terms of training, what nurses do and what nurses get, no better therapist really for what a nurse is. A nurse is always helping a person to become their own. A nurse holds the light for somebody and gives the light back to them so that they can take it on. You're alongside somebody, you're a mentor, you're a coach. There's none of this kind of what therapeutic approach you are. You just see a human being and you help a human being really connect back to their essence so that they can go on. And I just thought, wow, I've done this nursing, I've done all this other stuff, and now I've just realised, actually, that nursing is all that stuff that I've gone out and done.
Yeah.
It's kind of really like bizarre, and I'm kind of like, right, yeah, stop.
That raises quite a common and important thing, that a lot of people feel that, well, they don't feel, they know that they are good at something because people tell them that they are. They feel it themselves and they get results, but they don't have the lists of the after their name, the MSc, the BA, the PhD, and all of that stuff, and our society is very kind of obsessed with some kind of accreditation, and you've done this thing, and someone stamped it and said, yes, this person does this thing, blah blah blah. But it doesn't always mean that you actually understand what you have got that accreditation for. I mean, someone can go and do a weekend workshop in something, or like 10 weekends workshops in something, and then they get a stamp at the end saying they've completed this course, but that person might not have ever been changed by their training and become the person they need to be, whereas someone else might be that person already but not have these stamps of approval along the way. And it's a bit of a problem, really, I think. And also when it comes to this more hybrid approach to transformational practices or spiritual practice that you and I are into, and a lot of people are into, that doesn't really fit into the pigeonholes of the traditions that have come before. So someone might say, who's been your teacher in this, and what trainings have you done in this and this, and they're sort of more interested in that than who you are as a person, or what are the actual results that you get in your life, or so there's a mismatch there that's a real bummer. I mean, I understand the importance of it's. Yeah. When you're looking at 50 applicants and you've got to make a quick decision, you're going to look at the people who have got the most qualifications. It's the sort of the easiest way to pigeonhole people, but going beyond that, if you really want to get quality people involved in anything, you've really got to get to know them. And someone who has no qualifications, or it might be absolutely have the most incredible natural affinity for a particular role, but that's only going to come through people getting to know them. I mean, I'm not saying I've got the answer to all this, but it's quite a common thing to encounter.
No, and this I don't know whether juxtaposition in terms of with that, and in terms of how self-relating, intrapersonal relating with it as well, with saying that it took kind of last year. So I've been a qualified mental health professional since 2001. And I think it's because I never really had that initial desire to be a psychiatric nurse. I was wanting to do psychology. I could see something more in terms of helping people. I don't know why psychology. I thought I'd find the answers by being a psychologist. But it was like, I never really took the training. I valued what it was to be a psychiatric nurse. Yeah, you'd learn all these things, you'd get this, you're kind of like a jack of all trades and a master of none, really, as a nurse. So I suppose I just did enough just to get by. I never got I always got a pass. I thought, well, that's fine, that's all I want. I just want to pass. I'm not worried about being 80, 100%. And all that, which kind of was, in some ways, when I look back at that, that was kind of me value, that was the sense of value I had for myself too at that time, and where I was at. Wasn't really kind of not happy in my personal life, not truly happy in my personal life, so then not really valuing what it was to be a nurse.
Yeah.
And then
well, I mean, if you're going to do a training, it's kind of worth doing it to your full. Really,
exactly.
I mean, that, you can look back. It's easy to say that in hindsight.
yeah. So I've kind of got to be kind of grateful for what it's given me. It's given me a great understanding of symptoms.
Well, that's something I wanted to ask you is, so you've been working on the front lines with people in extreme psychological distress in your role as a psychiatric nurse. You must have had a kind of handful of things you've taken away personally from that work, lessons about the mind or the emotions, or that or maybe you haven't. I mean, is there if someone you met someone somewhere and they said, what are the sort of the handful of lessons you've taken away from that experience of, it's hardcore work you've been doing. I mean, I'm not asking you to go into too many details because a lot of it's confidential, but you've seen sides of people that most people will never see.
No, and I kind of struggle. I think I don't want to be derogatory towards the NHS. I think they're an emergency service, and I think they do a great job of helping people to get back on their feet. However, a lot of people need help. They need constantly picking up. So for me, that tells me, hang on, there's something not quite working right. Every now and again, people manage to turn their lives around, and I think that's in spite of the help that they get. So for me, the NHS or my experience within the NHS has been very medical model. It's we're treating symptoms. So people will come in and go, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, I've got this going on, and I've got that. And we'll go, yeah, you've got anxiety, or yeah, you've got depression. So we need to treat the depression. And I think it's partial. It's not really, it's saying it's a holistic approach, but it's very prescriptive. If you you fit these symptoms, you've got anxiety, right, you're going to have cognitive behavioural therapy. And I kind of struggle with that, and it might be because of the other stuff that I've done. I read a book last year by a guy called Benjamin Fry. He's a therapist now, but he's called The Invisible Lion. And in that book, he explains mental health symptoms through the nervous system. And it's the best explanation of mental health that I've ever had, really. That we're treating symptoms, not causes.
Mm.
And I think that's probably I've gone off, but I've had informants from NLP. I did shamanic training in Hawaii, and in that they said you need to look at reality. If reality doesn't make sense on one level, you need to go to another level. So you might need to go to a scientific level, you might need to go to a metaphysical level or shamanic level, and it will make sense on all that. And kind of fast forward into the work I've done with Stephen Gilligan and Robert Dilts with the generative coaching. And I remember talking about that book the first time I met you at yours, when I'd read The Hero's Journey, and that was the Stephen Gilligan and Robert Dilts book at that time, and it was like, wow. But so on the front line, I just think there's such good people in health, such incredibly good people that have been taught a way of working that to do it, that just help people, and this is what they need and this is what they are. I don't like the fact that we reduce people to conditions. That doesn't just sit comfortably with me. Well, you've got anxiety. So Benjamin Fry, in his book, he struggled with trauma. He struggled with stuff, and every now and again he'd think he'd be getting right, and then all of a sudden these things would come back. These emotional disturbances would come back, being depressed. He says, I go to the doctor, and he goes, I say to the GP, oh, I've got this, 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 and this. And the GP would go, you're depressed. He goes, yeah, I know. He goes, can you tell me what's causing it? And the doctor goes, well, it's because you're doing this, and because of this, and because you haven't got that, because you diet. He goes, yeah, I know. You're not telling me something that I don't know. He goes, it's a bit like, and he put an example in the book of, it's a bit like going to the doctor, you've got a bruised ankle. And you go to the doctor, can you tell me what's wrong with my ankle? He goes, yeah, it's all bruised. You go, yeah, I know it's bruised. Can you tell me what's causing the bruising? Can you tell me? And they usually give an x-ray and they look in it, and they might see something in there that what's causing the bruising and causing the inflammation. But he says in mental health, it's not that. People get these symptoms and he goes, they put it in the DSM or the ISD, but with all these symptoms which can't be explained physically. And then you're going away treating these things. But he says through the nervous system, when you look at trauma work, and if you look at trauma, how things get stuck in the muscles, it makes sense how things get locked down. And again, people, yeah, there's far more to it, I think.
So one of the things I'm hearing you say is that the NHS has got limited resources, and it's a sort of frontline emergency thing. It's the sort of best we can do in a bad situation, but really to have lasting change, we need to get away from this cookie cutter, off the shelf approach and categorizing, pigeonholing. I mean, this is a pattern that you've seen across education and politics, different types of health, nutrition. There's no, I mean, if you take nutrition, for example, there's not one diet that is universally healthy. I mean, different people need different types of food to thrive. And so, one of the things you and I are interested in is being unique, self-authored people, and working in community with other people that have that same approach, and that we're not, picking something off the shelf that's pre-packaged and you know, you just follow you don't even need to think anymore. You're just sort of on the track, and it just carries you along. But that was you know, one of the things that I'm is coming up for me, and I think is reflecting the time we live in, that which there's a lot of people searching for what lies beyond this kind of cookie cutter thing, and a bit more tailored, individually tailored therapy. But I mean, it's expensive sometimes to do that, or requires a lot of time and effort, and that's not something the NHS doesn't have a lot of time and doesn't have a lot of money and those sort of things. It doesn't have to involve money to do this stuff. I mean, you know, a lot of the people we know who are into this kind of approach, they're not rich people, and you know, a lot of this doesn't even require money, but it requires care and attention and time and that kind of thing. And the other thing is this thing of treating the symptoms rather than the causes. And in a way, that's getting to the cause, the root of these problems, requires a lot of time and effort and careful attention. And that's not something that, you know, some of these broader approaches that are just trying to treat everybody with one approach, that's kind of lacking from that because of the lack of resources. So it's kind of a conundrum we find ourselves in, because we know that the route out of this problem is a more individualized, tailored therapy for people and how to make their lives better. But it's so difficult to deliver that on a massive scale through a government funded body, or maybe it isn't. I mean, I don't know. It's you've been working in this stuff and I haven't, so that's just from the outside. That's my layman's view of it.
It's a long conversation, and I kind of and I think it does require a lot of creative conversation to kind of find it. It's the there's a lot of systemic stuff, really. You know, human beings, in a lot of ways, we're meaning makers. So if we give things negative meaning, the chances are that's how we're gonna see things, you know. Oh, I can't do it, this is impossible. One of the things the NHS does is you go from one assessment to another assessment, you're kind of being asked the same stuff all over again. You're constantly in this story. It's playing on inside a person anyway, and then outside of it, we're doing that so that we can get the understanding, so that we can find the right treatment for them. And I just think sometimes we kind of comes back to that, go back to Dan Millman again. Dan Millman lives what he teaches. Do you have time when you're working in frontline services to live what you teach? You know, if you're a dialectical behavioral therapist, are you practicing the pathways of mindfulness, of intrapersonal skills or interpersonal skills, the middle way? You know, these are all kind of aspects on it. Emotional regulation skills. You know, you practicing distress tolerance skills for yourself. You know, and people have a way, yeah, I practice it. I get to the end of the week and I have a glass of wine. That helps me to relax. So I get to the end of the day, and you kind of think, well, how healthy is that? You know, and I know I've looked at stuff kind of away from that. Yeah, it's that they're all can be helpful, but are they enough to kind of to move you forward, to kind of heal? You know, one of the things I'm kind of in the generative work that I do and the training that I've had is that a symptom is a sign that something is wanting to heal, something is wanting to come through. You know, it's not something to be got rid of, it's something to transform. And that language sits with me better than you need to take an antidepressant. You know,
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of what we were saying earlier, that say when your life feels a bit stuck, that's your subconscious or whatever, your deep emotional self saying that it's very unhappy with the way things are, and it's like, please do something about this. Hello, come in HQ. And if we ignore that message, or we just sort of deal with that sense of discomfort through addiction, to whatever, say alcohol or something, to just numb that pain, it's like dial down the intensity of that message, then a transformation in your life has never happened there, because you're just trying to deal with the symptoms, not the root cause. And one of the one of the things, I mean, I personally believe, is that to deal with the root causes to a lot of these problems requires this integrated approach of integrating body, heart, mind and spirit.
Yeah.
That that's the way out. So, but that's a little bit, seems, if you're working in one of these big organizations, there's so much there that it's so much easier to just give someone a pill, say, look, just take this pill, it'll make you feel better. But there are all of these practices like meditation, psychotherapy, psychedelics, martial arts, weightlifting, learning some of these theories out there which can help us make sense and help us make meaning out of life, that all of those things can be harnessed to make your life better. And quite often when people really do get better, they've taken on a lot of these things, and they're living what they're walking the talk. That's a path that's open to anybody with enough help from other people and also self-motivation.
Yeah, I think there's, a lot of things is very systemic. The NHS is held by societies, and that those opinions, people bring those opinions in, they project. We've done shadow work, and that we've talked about projections and how we project onto other people. It's not my fault, it's their fault. Well, if you're feeling it, it's in you, it's not in somebody else. That's kind of where I've got to. I might be feeling hate towards somebody, I hope not, but I don't want it. That's in me, it's not in them. I might be feeling.
It's quite a hard pill for us to swallow. That
I might be feeling love. Yeah. I kind of look around, kind of about violence. There's been interesting times with lockdown, with Black Lives Matter, and all this, the way that we're discriminating with each other and coming out with that, and then people, but at the same breath, people saying to somebody, well, you're an idiot. I look at all the stuff Donald Trump gets. Oh, I hate Donald Trump, he's a wanker, or whatever. I don't like what he says. I don't like how he behaves. I don't like that, but I think if I'm calling him an idiot, if I'm calling him whatever, I'm no different to him. I'm no different to that which I'm saying, which may be that I'm raging against, or feeling rage for, or feeling love and compassion for. And I kind of feel that arc, that journey that's taken me back to something that I felt. A feeling always comes to me years ago. I was laying in King's Park. I was 8, 9, and just looking at the sky. And I kind of, when people say it, that, wow, this is incredible to be part of this. And I was lost in the sky. Probably my first meditation experience of, having a spiritual awakening, or just a state of, wow. Because I don't know really, but that memory often comes back to me. That there is that's something more. And why do people behave the way that they do? What is it that nature has set up for us? And you see it kind of a lot. You see it with birds doing, where, you know, they're trying to attract the female, the male birds. They're all decorative. They show up, they don't get it. We do it. We dress up, comb our hair, go off when we're teenagers and partying into a bit older to nightclubs, and, you know, try and attract the opposite member of sex or same sex or whatever. Look at me on the outside and this, that and the other. And then we start to get to know someone, and all of a sudden we start to not like things about them and start accusing them of stuff. Start telling them that they're this and that they're that. We're really, what we want to be saying is, and I think non-violent communication, you know, MVC really says it well. When I notice you do this, I feel this. And I think that's coming to me more now, because I've been on the other side. I've been that, making myself feel better by telling other people that they're wrong, that they're no different, or trying to live up to other people's expectations about myself rather than be genuine to who I want to be.
That's one of those sort of theories that is really liberating, is this psychological theory of shadow and projection. And once you understand that's how our minds work, you really can start to do the hard work of not projecting your crap out there onto other people in the world, and start to own it and let that change you for the better. But it's hard work. But, you know, the first step is that piece of information there, that there is such a thing as shadow and projection, that's extremely liberating and life-changing. To have that piece of that bit of theory is really helpful. So we kind of got off a little bit off your story. So I'd love to hear more about the shamanic training in Hawaii. That sounds really interesting.
That was a week of intensive stuff. The Huna philosophy is taught by Serge Kahili King. And the best way of explaining that is the first thing that we did when we met up and we went outside is he got us to walk through a lava tube. The lava tube, we said, was the initiation. He goes, you walk through that, when you come out the other side, it's about that you're accepting that you're going to start looking at life differently. And the whole week was based on just tuning into nature and tuning into the elements. So kind of having that awareness of looking at the patterns of air, the patterns of wind, the patterns of water, looking at animals, just watching them, and just what you felt inside when you watch them and how you could merge with them. You know, he's saying that you can shapeshift with anything really, but by just imagine your energy blending with their energy and just walking with it. But just tune into the patterns of nature and just understand that with what's you. And the lesson from that as well is, when you know the pattern, you can understand the pattern, you can change it. So if you're looking at your own habits, the way that you're talking and this, when you become aware of it, something might take somebody to point out, and if you then you can start to change it. You can look at what it is that's reinforcing it, and then what you need to do to heal it. So if I go back to my mental health training, somebody that's depressed, I've never seen a depressed person doing this. They might have a moment where they do something and they'll go, yay, but they quite often go back. They have inhibited breathing, the breath's not moving through the body properly. They're folded over on themselves, their head is down, and there's a lot of stuck energy that's become really heavy and in the body. Mm. And so you look at that somatic pattern, and you just think, what's the conversation that needs to go on there? What's the communication going on there? How is that body holding that experience of depression in place?
Well, in that circumstance would you feel moved to not even talk to somebody because their body is telling a story, that you might actually just say, well, let's try a different posture, like, why don't you stand up and hold your arms out like this for a minute, and then let's talk about how you feel after doing that.
Yeah, I mean that's what I do now, and that's kind of the training that I've had through generative work, through predominantly Stephen Gilligan, and trance work was, our first language. And as a musician, this will probably resonate more with you. That it does a little bit with me, but our first language is music. Our first language is poetry. It's symbolic. It's not words. Words. I think I've been looking back at Ken's book, No Boundaries, when he says that as soon as we give words to something, we've changed it. It's no longer what it is. It's no longer what it really is. It's become something else. So it's that, what are the words? So going back to the show, I don't want to lose the thread on the shamanic stuff and go into something else. I think they all link. I think a lot of what I've done, it's all very interwoven and very, very linked, and just
I won't get the word right, but what's the famous Hawaiian prayer? Is it Hona? I can't get the name, but you know the name, Honopono or something like that.
Ho'oponopono.
Yeah. So you can see why I didn't get that word right.
Ho'oponopono.
Yeah. Was that part of your shamanic training? Because people might have heard of that prayer.
Nah, Serge never did that Ho'oponopono training.
I've heard you've talked about it before.
I've done it through the Dr. Hugh Len and the Joe Vitale version of it, where it's that mantra of, apparently, if you the way that works is that this 4-stage mantra of I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. It brings everything back to zero. That opportunity to start again. So everything has a vibration in it, but that's a different one.
Okay.
You say that, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and it. So if you've got a poor relationship with money, if you was just to hold your bank card and go, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive you, thank you, your relationship with money will start to improve. I think it does work. I think a lot of it comes with belief and what you project out there as well. So, but it's very interesting. But the traditional Ho'oponopono is cord cutting. So in Hawaii, they have this, or in the Huna tradition, they have these things that we give out, what they call aki cords. The best way to imagine them is just like, imagine the tubes in intensive care. We've got all these tubes coming into your body. That every time we meet somebody, these aki cords move, so we exchange energy back and forth. I think in neuroscience is saying now that we have mirror neurons in the brain, and we have a limbic system that resonates. So we pick up empathically, and through the limbic system, it's a music, it's a dance. It's just like when you walk into a room, you kind of, if there's been a row in there, you don't need anybody to tell you. It's in the atmosphere. You feel it. It's all of a sudden, you just tune in to the energy that's in there, and you can hold that tension. And that tension can get stuck. So people might become depressed. They go, I've had a really great life. I don't know why. But they might have just been picking up all this stuff and not knowing that they need to release it in themselves. And I think that's where the shamanic training up, kind of, that you've got to know the pattern. Listen to what the pattern's going on. Tune in. What do you feel? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? Tune into all your senses, because your senses, not your thoughts, which are words, but your senses are what's in tune with nature, because they're a part of nature. They belong in nature. the human mind has been able to, we've been able to describe things and to create things and to become from this and imagine things. It's given us a wonderful ability to imagine things. So, why you get for a lot of things is the inner world is no different to the outer world. Your dreams will cause the way that you imagine things and give meaning to things will work with the inner world as much as the outer world, because it's in you. You experience it in you. So it's that everything's a waking dream. So if I have a nightmare, they will say, or Serge would say, if you have a dream and you don't like the dream, you don't like, oh, you wake up sweating from it. He goes, you need to talk. This here is a parent to this here. So that the conscious mind is the parent to the unconscious mind. So you need to say to it, like you would say to your sons, if you don't like what they're doing, you might say, as your parent, I'm not liking what it is that you're doing. I would prefer it if you were to do this. So they say to the unconscious, you've got to say to the unconscious, I don't like the messages that you're giving me up here. Can you give it me in a way that I can understand it and receive it? Because I want to help you. But when we're caught up in habit and we don't know, we don't realize that that's what we've got to do. We've got to retrain the unconscious, because it will keep doing what it keeps doing if that's what it's used to. If it's not given another direction, it will just follow, and it will follow the direction outside if we're not giving it direction or we're not being consistent with it. So I can bring that habit up with diet. In my sense, I can say to myself, right, I'm going to do this. And then before I know it, the shadows come up and I've done something else. And it's just like, I'm not being consistent enough in the direction, but say diet.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there are people that have a good relationship with their conscious mind and their subconscious mind. It's a sort of like a harmony between mind and emotions or something, in the same way that they might be good parents and have a good relationship with their children. And we're always striving to have a better relationship between our cognitive logical mind and our subconscious, unconscious, more emotional selves. And it's kind of like a life's work, isn't it, to refine that relationship and make it ever more wise and caring.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. One of the things that I get with generative work and that generative process is that, the key thing for that is you can't solve a problem if you're in a problem state, or what we would call a crash state. So you have to get yourself into what we would then say is the opposite to a crash, which is a coach state. So it's a much more optimal state. So you're feeling free, you've got relaxation in the body, and you're aware of what the body's saying. So all these hand movements, these gestures people do and what they're talking, that's their music. Oh, that's interesting. I noticed when I said that, you did this. What's that technique for? What's that serving? And it might be at a time somebody was saying something that they did that just to protect themselves, but it's got stuck and they keep using that pattern, but in situations where they don't need to do it.
Well, that's when working with other people is so important, because a lot of these things, you don't even know you're doing it when you're doing it. But if you're in a relationship with another person or a group of people where you trust them and there's love and respect and care in that group, it's safe, and people have got your permission to, and that they've got your permission, you've got their permission to actually comment on things like that and say, why do you keep flinching when you do whatever? That it's quite often the first time people even realize they're doing that. I mean, I've been doing it by listening to myself back in some of the interviews I've done with people, noticed things that I never even knew I do. I'm trying to get better at it, but I was saying, all the time, lots and lots of and in the moment, I didn't even realize I was doing it. But looking back at it, and it's having that perspective outside of yourself is a liberating force, but you need to have the right relationship with the person. So I'm not recommending people open up the lines of communication to everybody in their lives to just keep picking up on it, like, oh, why is your hair like that? Why do you always why are you always slouching and blah blah blah? Why are you always doing this and this and this and this? I mean, that's too much, and that's going to help make people collapse. But there's a kind of a sweet spot of the world giving you feedback, and you giving other people feedback in a kind of in a loving and trusting way to help lift each other up. It is possible, and it's also important because if you can't see outside of yourself a lot of the time, you only do that through relationship with other people.
I think all of the practices and that I've gone on, they've said the same thing in different ways, but I've talked about where I'm at with generative work and the coach state, and it kind of, I think what you said just reminded me of that. The acronym of coach stands for centered, open, aware, connected, and hospitable. So the idea of that is, the first thing, you need to be connected to yourself. You need to be centered in yourself. You need to know that where you are. Because from my experience with myself is, I've not really been connected with myself over a lot. Even with the trainings that I've done, it would be, oh, right, I need to be that trainer. I always remember saying to Dan once, he goes, oh, I love your work. I'm going to go out and teach your work. With all that enthusiasm, he just looked at me and he went, I teach my work. You're going to teach your version. And it was like, oh my word. I thought, wow, that really kind of showed, but that's true. That's true. He teaches his work. I'm not going to teach his work. But it's that I'd given when in that sense, I'd given my center away. It was all about him and not about me. And I've lost it in work with clients. It's that you lose those boundaries. You suddenly take on, and you merge with what's going on for them, and you take it on, and you really feel it, and you can't shake it off afterwards. So I think it's really important. You do need to be centered. You do need to be connected. That I'm here. It's okay. I am here. Can you imagine, if your kids fall over or they're in trouble, and it was, you'll be all right. I'm kind of, they're going to think, bloody hell.
Yeah, a lot of what I do with my kids, sometimes they get, they're very hurt or they're extremely upset and they're just wailing. There's no conversation is going to happen in that moment, and I'm just there for them in that way. I was just like, we don't need to do anything other than just be here together, and we'll let whatever's happening do what it's doing. And then it might turn into something else, and then we'll be doing something else. But that that kind of gets you out of that thing where you think like you have to fix things right in the instant. Like, what's the thing we need to do? The solution. But before that moment happens, what you're describing is so important. And in when you're working with people with mental health issues, I can imagine that's a really important, that's the first step. The first thing to do with a person is just to be present and centered with them. You're just two people living life together. They're having a worse time than you are in this particular moment, and you're just going to be there for them. And then who knows where it's going to go from there. But that's the initial thing. And I was thinking about, it makes me think about the average time someone spends with a GP, I think, is about 8 minutes, isn't it? With a doctor. I'm sure I heard some statistics.
Yeah, 8 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
So, so that's not an easy job for a doctor. And or a patient, you know, you go in and there's no time to have that moment of connecting as two human beings, you know.
No, a GP friend of mine who's in the generative community, Mark Chambers, I'm plugging his book here. He wrote a book for GPs for doing that you can do it in 10 minutes. These are the things that you need to do within yourself to have that connection. I think it's called Bedside Manner, the book.
Right.
Bedside Manner, I've got it by a guy called Mark Chambers, which is that, you know, this is the art of creative consultancy is the tag note to it. So you've got those short sessions, but you know, you want to be there. So it's that presence. So one, you know, that say, go back to it, the C is that you need to be connected with yourself and centered with yourself. And then the next bit is then that bit that you're going, then you open up. Then you start to open up through yourself to say, right, I'm with you. I can open up and open up to your resources. What are the skills? What are my skills? What is my knowledge? What is my learning? What is this? How can I be present with that? And then what am I aware of? What am I awake to? I need to be awake. I don't want to just be narrow, because they'll have a story. When you work with people with mental health, they're troubled. They're really, really troubled. They're really in suffering. You know, you kind of don't want to jump into their suffering. You want to be here, but be with them, and don't get lost in their story, because their story is heart-wrenching. Really got to look at what they're doing. You know, sometimes they're very dishevelled. Sometimes they're beaten. They've cut themselves badly all over, and you're seeing all these wounds, and you're seeing all this distress. And it's that, yeah, I have to be present. I have to be present, and I have to kind of be with this. But is that, again, what is my intention in this? So that will come to the next bit, the heart. This is, where am I going with this? What direction are we going in? How do I stay centered and open, aware, and keep going where I'm going? And how do I welcome it? You know, and then share that back. Do you know when you said something that really, I felt a tightening here. That touched me. Is that something that you feel? And I think it's just that sharing of experience, whereas quite often we don't. So there's a lot of things in that hospitable thing is about welcoming it. You know, there's a part of me that really hates. That's great. Isn't that good to know? I'm really curious about that. You know, let's just welcome that part in. And even sometimes asking them to name it. I'm really anxious. So there's a part of you that's really anxious, which would be that reflective, rather than saying you're anxious. There's a part of you that's really anxious. When did you first notice that part? So bringing it, and I think that the thing is helping people to realize that they're human. So these parts of themselves, these expressions, you did, you know, you've trained in voice dialogue, you told me, and the big mind process where we dissect the self. These parts, you know, in that process that I watched a YouTube video not so long ago, again, of that big mind process, and that welcoming of these different parts and learning from these different aspects and parts of yourself. They're just welcomed in, they're not pushed back, and, you know, and just so that they can open and not left to fester underneath. And I think that's so important. That's so important with what we do.
I think meditation is a skill and a practice that can really help us be spacious enough to be host to some of this craziness. Could you talk a bit about your own journey with meditation practices? And
I think I've tried a lot. I think I've tried a lot. It's work, meditation, and I think that can get lost sometimes. You know, people fall into the side effect of it, which is relaxation, and quite often sleep, and don't go beyond that. I think you've got to work through that part. And I think my first taste of meditation, I think I'm kind of quite lucky really. It was in Japan with Dan, and we was at a Zen monastery, and there was a Zen monk there, and it's kind of right for me because it's like, so if I'm given a direction, this is how it's meant to be done this way. I kind of okay, let's do it. And again, Dan will quite often say it in his teaching, but the Zen monk says, "Sit still, do not move. Bring the body to stillness, and the rest will follow." So that's kind of always been that sticks with me. That if I'm doing a meditation, it's like sit still, do not move. You know, you see people doing that in meditation, or I'm like, you're not meditating. And it became a little bit for me, but then I learned there's other ways of doing it. There's other ways of doing it, and I was just thinking, I've done the Passion, I've done the 10-day thing. That was, I highly recommend that. I think that it's still learning from that now, and I'd go back and do another one. There's times I just think, wow, you know, I think I've done that. It's prepared me for this lockdown nicely, really, and at work I can just sit at work, and there can be other stuff going on, but I'm kind of like, I'm okay with it. Other people go, oh, I hate this, I've got nothing to do, and I'm like, well, there's always something to do. Yeah, I did do a lot with Integral. There were so many different ways of doing it, but the distilled practices work best for me. You know, those walk into the toilet. That's the time to meditate. That's time to feel your feet. That's the time to go there. Even sitting on the loo. And I say that to people because they go, "Oh, you're asking me to be mindful. I haven't got no time." I go, "Do you go to the toilet?" I go, "There you go. You can do it then." And it's, you know, people say that they can't meditate, but I noticed yesterday how the art of driving, you can put it into anywhere in life, that meditation is in life. The basic components of what you need to meditate is in life. So driving is a great one. Driving is like being caught up in the chittery chattery monkey mind. You can be there in the car, you can be listening to the radio, you can be singing along to it, and not even be aware, just trusting the fact that your unconscious is doing all the work. It's all in the muscle, it's all in the memory. But then something will happen, somebody suddenly will break in front of you, and this, that, and the other, and you're there, you're on it. All of a sudden, you're present, you're in the moment, you're no longer thinking about the lyrics of the song. You're not even hearing the radio anymore, it's suddenly disappeared into the background. And that's really what meditation is for me. It's about that ability to sit and then just drop below here and just melt it into the body and just tune into the other stuff. You know, what's my breathing like right now? How's my breath moving in and out of my body? You know, the body awareness scans. What's going on as I sweep through? Where's tight and where's relaxed? So you kind of almost like driving a car through your senses. But that came to me yesterday, that actually the art of driving is just really meditation. So many people go off, they switch off, they're doing this, they're in conversations on their phone, but as soon as something happens, it brings them right back into the moment.
I think you raised something really important there, and it comes back to this thing of remembering that there's sort of two different types of meditation. One is sitting on a cushion, and the other is when you're not on the cushion and you're, you know, going about life. And I think doing both is really important. If you only do the sitting meditation, then it's quite easy to say, you know, do an hour or whatever sitting on your cushion meditating, and then you forget about it the rest of the day. Whereas if you supplement that with these short moments of awareness throughout the day, then they become more continuous, and it's like constantly remembering to be mindful, to be aware, to be focused, to tap into the part of you that's always open and uncontracted and expansive and at peace. awake and aware, that can become a habit of always remembering that more and more and more and more, until it becomes more and more continuous. And but if you only do the stuff where you never sit down, but when you do the sitting meditation, that's the chance to go really deep into it. So I think the two practices work really well together. And yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. Toilet meditation.
How many times do you go to the toilet? It's just eventually it becomes my bladder needs a release, and so does my energy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, that's cool.
there is a lot, and I kind of think, meditation practice for me, it's kind of been a lot through workshops. I've done a lot of workshops, and there's always a process at some form of meditative experiences, even if it's working with another person, even just doing mirroring. Let's mirror each other. Just that it's so anchors so much to the present. But it's, I think it would come from Dan, it would come from Serge. Serge in particular will say it. In the generative field, we'll say it as well. We talk about coach state and being in this optimal state, and it's, you need to practice it at least 15 times a day for it to get into the body. But that doesn't mean to say that you sit on a cushion, you have to do this. It's just bringing it to awareness. But Serge said that the trick to life is not being centered. The trick to life is knowing that you're not centered so that you can come back. And I like that. That talks to me. That talks to me.
Could you say a little bit about, just briefly, about NLP? Because you brought NLP up a couple of times. And your experience with NLP and what that did for you.
I thought it's an interesting question. So NLP appealed to me because it's the study of excellence.
Just for anyone who doesn't know, NLP stands
for neuro-linguistic programming. So our patterns, our linguistic and our program. So it's all really about our programming and our patterns. We hold different patterns, our values and our beliefs. We have meta programs. We will talk our language. We can be some people are very abstract in their language. You think some people are very detailed. I know my father-in-law was very, very detailed talker. It was quite a bit of a running joke in the family is, oh my God, we haven't got time. Can you speed up? We need to get on. Here we go. This thing that can be said in 30 seconds is now going to take an hour. So some people are very detailed in that. So it's about recognizing that. I think externally or internally, I can be quite abstract, and quite externally, I flip between the two. But NLP is it's that study of excellence, which kind of appeals to me. It looks at what works and models. The idea is about model what works. What optimizes experience, what helps with that. So it just appealed to me, looking into that and seeing these different ways that you can swish things, that you can use imagination. And kind of interesting for me with NLP is that my teacher did it in Hawaii. So the NLP that I learned had a bit of a Hawaiian kind of thing. And the Dan stuff was Hawaiian. And I eventually went to Hawaii and then learned it from Huna, which kind of took it to another level, really, with that. You've got a conscious mind, you've got an unconscious mind, but then you've got this field mind, or the higher self kind, which is much more spiritual slant to it. So NLP kind of resonated with me, but it never talked to me enough to go on and just
Yeah.
become a full-blown practitioner, an NLP practitioner. I'll use it. And then for me, it's the generative change. So, you know, Stephen Gilligan, it's kind of interesting, really. Stephen Gilligan was one of Richard Bandler and John Grinder, who were the founders of NLP. They had people that would do research for them and go out and interview and talk to these wonderful people that were doing successes. So I think Stephen went and he modelled Milton Erickson, who, in my opinion, from what I've known and read about him and heard about him, has got to be the greatest therapist that's ever walked on this earth in helping people to make change and last. And he worked with the unconscious. You know, this Milton, I could go into Milton Erickson and talk, but he had polio. He was enraged as a very young boy when he heard doctors telling his mum outside his bedroom door he was going to die that night. He somehow survived the night, woke up in a pool of sweat, but was then paralysed for quite a while afterwards. But eventually he taught himself, he reimagined moving his muscles in a different way, and he healed himself to the best he could to do that, but was colourblind. He could only see the colour purple. And just had this brilliant way of helping people to make really good change. He'd welcome their world, and he'd step into their world and join them and help and lead them out. Never ever lost his centre. So the stories I've heard about Erickson is brilliant. Virginia Satir, who is a brilliant family therapist, very top of her game, was getting great results. They looked at her, looked at what she did, looked at her style, how she worked with clients and her relationships with them. They looked at Fritz Perls and Gestalt therapy and how everything was a Gestalt and in its whole. They just really looked at what it was that was the best of human experiences and how you could achieve this excellence. It was just a great wellness model. But Bandler and Grinder never regulated it. So it had dodgy practitioners and it got a real bad rap because people were manipulative with it, unfortunately. So Robert Dilts, who's got the NLP University, he's used it in businesses and growth, and you know, runs a lot of programs. So both Stephen and Robert's use of NLP is highly, highly ethical. Well, Stephen was a relationship coach as a psychologist that used trance work, which is what Erickson's work is. So predominantly working with the unconscious, but not hypnotizing people. And Robert just looking at those models and looking at those patterns, you know, association, dissociation. What happens when you associate with something, you see it through your eyes. What happens when you dissociate? You can look at it, you can examine it. So if you look at it, so you can look at your behavior, come away from your subjective experience and look at it through a different lens, see what needs to be changed, how you're working with that. It's a phenomenal approach and used ethically, really helps people to turn things around.
Cool. Thanks for going into that.
But it does mean for people that if they are going to do it, and it can do things really quickly as well. So you don't need loads and loads of therapy with it. But it does mean that people have got to work, and a lot of people don't want to work. They want the magic wand, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. That reminds me of the secret is that there's no secret. It's just hard work, you know.
Yeah.
It's not the secret people want to hear, but I mean, some things come for free, but there's a lot of this stuff that's just hard work. But you know, if you want to get some results, that's what it takes.
Everything we need is within us. We just need people to guide us along the way.
So this has been a far-ranging conversation, and I feel like we've covered a lot. Is there anything that you feel that needs to be said before we wrap up?
I think if I have to say anything, it's one of the things, I think it's one of your questions, really, one of the questions that you sent me, really, would be or unless somebody else said it to me today. I work with young people and I've worked for a long time, and quite often with them it's about fitting in. It's about finding a place to belong. I don't fit in, and it's just to recognise the world wants your difference. It doesn't want your sameness.
That is almost the sort of the theme, could be the motto of the conversations I've had with people about this kind of journey with weaving this unique path that we can all do in our lives, and being unique is a good thing, and bringing your unique gifts to the world is really appropriate, I think, now. In the I think it really fits the time that we live in.
Yeah, well, we're all a part of nature, isn't it? Nature created us in some ways. We've evolved from that first spark. Yeah. Whatever that spark was, people call it all sorts of different things, and if we're not connecting to our uniqueness, our differences, and bringing that through the world with kindness, with compassion, with strength, with courage, without hitting people. I always come back to Gandhi, really. So it says, be the change you want to see in the world. And I'm talking to myself a lot here, and I keep having to reinforce this a lot with myself. And I've had, one of my great guides and teachers has been Gary. Gary Hawk.
Gary Hawk.
Who does athletic coaching. He's a brilliant coach. He's very, very brilliant. He's right from the moment, and it does challenge you, and he does really hold up a big mirror to look, and it can. But yeah, to just remind you that, and for me, kind of saying, I can hear his voice saying, Paul, you've got it. Your uniqueness is important, and I will pass that on. And I think.
Well, you are a very unique person, and a very authentic person, and very loving, accepting. You hold a great physical. You've got this very warm, energetic field around you physically when you're with you in person. You hold a space very nicely.
Thank you.
And and it's been, I love you very much, and really benefited from the time we've spent together, and you've got a lot of wisdom to share from all of this. You're a very well trained person. You've done a lot of different trainings, and also all this super hardcore work, for 20 years, working with people in some of the most extreme situations that are not often out there in the open in our society. They kind of happen behind closed doors. So yeah, you've seen a side of people that not a lot of people have seen, and there's a great generosity that I've felt with you that's come through that exposure and working with people like that. Is there any place that people can find out more about things you do or things you care about?
Well, currently every Sunday I'm doing with a friend of mine, George, part of the generative community. We do a coach state practice, so people can join on that. It's on Facebook. So it's a group you can find it. If you find me, you probably find the group, and you can ask to join the group.
What's the name of the group?
Yeah, it's a generative practice group. So yeah, you can just ask to join that and come in. I'm on the International Association of Generative Change. I have to say that because if you put IAGC in, you'll find something they're doing that thing. So I'm a member on there as well, because I've got the first part of the coaching thing to do that. So I've got contact details on there, and I'm in the process of setting up my website. I'm a bit slow. I had an epiphany the other day, and I'm going to use the word epiphany, which is a word I don't use that often. that every time I come to write in it, I keep thinking, oh, never realised before. I'm quite sloppy, but I have a perfectionist trait in me that pisses me off, to be quite honest with you. And because I don't see myself as a perfectionist. But if I'm doing a website, oh, I've got to get the words right, I've got to get this right. I just kind of realised I just need to be me. So I had this, this came to me yesterday, was that if I'm going to write on my website, do you know, for years I've been trying to say the right thing on this, but do you know what? I really don't know what to say, but I've got these skills. If you're interested, I can help.
Well, I look forward to seeing that.
And I just think that's it. That's me. That's who I am. And it's like, I think I've got lost. If you know, I think don't. Again, it comes back to that. Your difference is what makes the difference for people. Your uniqueness is that what's do that. So try not to make yourself something that you're not. If that's how
really,
you are,
really important in the social media age to just to actually be brave enough to be yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. You know, you don't need this highfalutin thing. So I kind of got that now. I'm going to get on and get that website out there as well. And but really for now, Facebook is the time to do it. And join the coaching practice on a Sunday. There's 2 of us doing it. It's a great community that wants to bring creative change to the world. And really helping people to heal and grow. It's everything that I thought was in integral is in generative.
Yeah, but it's kind of out there in the culture now, in the wild, and coming up in lots of different ways. This particular way of integrating and generating. Yeah,
I think it is. You know, Ken Wilber's stuff is great. You know, his Aqua map is brilliant. But that's all it is a map.
Yeah, it's up to us to fill it in with our own lives, isn't it?
Yeah, we have to live the terrain.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Paul. It's been really generous of you to give this time to this call.
Thank you. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Cool.